And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Welcome to the Politics, Prepping, and Paranormal Podcast.
Flibbity-jibbity nonsense.
I thought it was terrific.
Not just big, it's yeah.
Let's go.
Welcome, and thanks for listening to the Politics, Prepping, and Paranormal Podcast. My name is Jeff Morey, and I'm your host. I'm back from a short break, and this week I'm excited to welcome New York Times and international best-selling author J.D. Barker to the show. J.D. is the author of hit thrillers such as The Fourth Monkey and The Sixth Wicked Child, novels such as Behind a Closed Door, and his newest book, Something I Keep Upstairs. And he's co-authored a series of bestsellers with James Patterson, as well as Dacre Stoker, Christine Daigle, Kyle Dunn, Richard Bailey, and E.J. Fendorf. His books incorporate elements of the supernatural, science fiction, crime, mystery, and of course, horror. J.D. is truly one of the revolutionary literary minds of our time, and he's become a household name to anyone who enjoys reading and is interested in any of the subject matter that he covers so well in all of his work. So I'm excited to welcome JD to the show and talk to him about his books and his career. But before I do, let's talk about some of this week's big news stories. Probably the biggest news story this week, at least for political junkies like me, is the passing of President Trump's big, beautiful bill in the U.S. House of Representatives on Thursday morning. After late-night committee meetings and even a last-minute assist by Trump himself, the bill barely passed by only one vote. Republican Representatives Thomas Massie from Kentucky and Warren Davidson of Ohio being the only GOP holdouts that refused to support the bill. Massie said in a statement following the vote, quote, "While I love many things in the bill, promising someone else will cut spending in the future does not cut spending. Deficits do matter, and this bill grows them now. The only Congress we can control is the one we are in." Some of the things that are in the bill include tax cuts for individuals and businesses, reduced spending on SNAP, or the Supplemental Nutrition and Assistance Program, new work requirements for Medicaid, no taxes on gun silencers, shutting off funding for Planned Parenthood, big victory there, as well as more funding for deportations of illegal aliens and $150 billion in new money for the Defense Department and National Security. Of course, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that the Democrats are losing their minds over the bill, already claiming that many Republicans will lose their seats during the upcoming midterm elections, primarily due to the cuts in Medicare, food stamps, and of course, Planned Parenthood. We're still in the midst of the tariff wars, and it doesn't look like a swift resolution is coming anytime soon. On Friday, President Trump threatened the European Union with a sweeping 50% tariff, posting online that trade talks with the bloc are, quote, going nowhere. Trump has previously stated that he would hit the European Union with a 39% tariff on April 2nd's Liberation Day. He also threatened tech giant Apple with a 25% tariff if it doesn't start producing iPhones in the U.S. Trump's threats have pushed down U.S. stocks, and European markets are down as well, with indexes in Germany and France plunging 2%. Unfortunately, it isn't going away anytime soon, and while I do support Trump on what he is trying to do overall, there are things I question, such as the threat made against Apple. From the outside looking in, I myself don't see Apple being willing to shut down foreign iPhone production and acquire land and build new plants in the U.S. without incurring significant financial burden. Again, I'm no stock and financial expert, but I don't really see that as being a reasonable demand personally. Tragic news on Wednesday night as a young couple of Israeli embassy staffers were shot dead outside of the Capitol Jewish Museum in D.C. Embassy staffers Yaron Lashinsky and Sarah Milgram were killed at the hands of a gunman as they were leaving a young diplomat's reception at the museum. Lashinsky had purchased an engagement ring and planned to propose to Milgram next week in Jerusalem. So sad to see two vibrant young people with such promising careers that would have potentially been spending their lives together be killed by a coward extremist who chanted "Free Palestine" as he was led away after his arrest. You see why President Trump has tried to make ending these Free Palestine rallies at these universities and public places such a priority. I'm not throwing support behind either side, but cowardly acts of terrorism such as this have no place in our country or anywhere in the world. Sending out prayers to the families of the couple and everyone in the embassy that knew them. Such a shame. It was announced on Sunday that former President Joe Biden was diagnosed with an aggressive form of prostate cancer, which has reportedly spread to his bones. On Thursday, former Democratic Representative Dean Phillips slammed the Democratic Party for allegedly covering up Biden's decline in mental acuity over the course of his term in office. He said in an article in the Free Press, quote, "In 2021, I had a front row seat on two occasions when he, Biden, addressed the Democratic caucus. I also spent time in close proximity to the president during two flights on Air Force One in 2021 and 2022, where I was alarmed to see the president's obvious decline in communication skills, gait, and leadership capability." Phillips even claimed after discussing Biden's health with many top Democrats like Gavin Newsom, he pushed many of them to enter the presidential race to challenge Biden, but no one would answer the call. He went on to say that top Democrats such as Hakeem Jeffries gave him strong opposition when he decided he would enter the race and try to primary Biden. He claimed that the media played a large role in preventing him from being listed on the ballot in 2024. Does this really surprise anyone? Even Democrats? Come on, I mean, I think by now even the most staunch Democratic supporters have to admit that Biden's goose was cooked before he ever entered his second term. It just further goes to show how the mainstream media has been weaponized, so to speak, to advance liberal, woke, and far left agendas. I've said from the beginning that the Biden administration was nothing but a shadow Obama-Soros operation from the start. Just further proves what I've been saying all along. In international news this week, the United Kingdom has signed a deal to hand over the sovereignty of the Caicos Islands to Mauritius on Thursday, returning them to the African country and closing Britain's last colonial outposts on the continent. For those of you that aren't familiar, the Caicos Islands are in the central Indian Ocean, located about 1,000 miles off the southern tip of the Indian subcontinent. Mauritius, officially called the Republic of Mauritius, is an island country off the coast of East Africa, east of Madagascar. Why should I care, you might ask? Well, the Caicos Islands are home to a very strategically important joint US-UK military base, and Mauritius is a close trading partner of China. We've been operating that base since the 70s, and supposedly under the New Deal, Mauritius has agreed that Britain will still remain in control of the base for 99 years. I just don't like hearing anything that will even potentially give China any kind of foothold into our territory or strategic interests. Okay, that's what's happening in the news here at home and around the world this week. At this time, I would like to welcome my guest, JD Barker. Welcome, JD, and thanks for joining me.
Hey, Jeff, how you doing?
I'm good, man. You've had such an outstanding career and resume of literary works you've authored. Can you tell us about what first got you interested in writing?
Oh, wow. So writing it's one of those things I've been doing my entire life. I grew up without a TV in the house. And this is the 70s, so that doesn't really mean much. We had three channels. There was nothing worth watching anyway. But we hit the library at a very early age, so I was reading very young. And I've always been writing. I've got a sister who's 15 months younger than me. I would write stories when I was like 6, 7 years old and staple them together. She'd check them out in my little fake library in my room. I'd charge her late fees. So this dates back quite a bit. But writing, my parents encouraged it, but they always added the little caveat: it's a great hobby, but you can't make a living at it. You have to get a real job. So I did what I was supposed to do. I went off to college. I got a couple of degrees and ended up sitting behind a desk, and I hated every second of it. And I would come home and I would write at night.
Outstanding. Boy, you told him hold my beer if that I'm not making a living out of it, right?
Kind of, it's funny because I think my mom, even in today's world, like she still doesn't think, that you can do well with this. But how are you really doing? Like
Right.
she's always concerned. But yeah, if you dial in, I've gotten really lucky.
I guess you just need to tell your mom all she's got to do is jump on Google if she has any questions about how well you're doing with it, right?
Maybe that might help. I'm sure she'd poke holes in that too.
Right. All right. So I'm gonna role play here for just a minute. Let's say you just finished a publicity tour for a book you've written and published. You made your rounds for months promoting it, and now it's time to start on the next project. How does JD Barker begin the process of brainstorming his next great work? Do you have
I
a
never
happy place you go to for inspiration, or how does that work for you?
Yeah, I honestly, I never actually stop. I write every day. So when I finish up one book, the next day I'm right on the very next one. I tend to plot them out. Like I kind of break my day up. I'll write whatever my current book is in the morning, and then in the afternoons I spend that time plotting out whatever my next book is. So I've always kind of got a little overlap between the two. In general, though, I've just got an app on my phone called Simple Note, and one of the documents is just called ideas. So whenever some kind of crazy idea pops into my head, I write it down in there. And when it's time to actually write something, that's where I go to farm it. A lot of times I'll ask, the various people that work with me, like my agents. My film agent has been tremendous when it comes to this, because he'll walk out of a meeting with, let's say, Sony, and they'll tell him what they're looking for. What shows are, they want to develop. So I'll write a lot of my books to that particular market, to what the folks in Hollywood are looking for their next streaming series.
I understand. I do the same thing with my show. If I'm a truck driver, so by trade. So when I'm driving around, if I've stopped somewhere, things will just pop in my head, and I've got Motorola Note on my phone. I'll just pop in the Motorola Note and just make a little note of something that I thought of, for a future show episode or topic, or just something I wanted to add in. So you don't ever take a vacation. You got to take a vacation at some point. It's just always going
No,
through your
I'm
head
I'm
all the time.
I'm bad. Yeah, we were just at Disney World, and I still spend a couple hours every day, in front of the computer. It keeps me sane. It's painters paint. Some people write songs. I have to write.
That's great. A lot of your writing involves elements of the supernatural. Obviously, by the name of my show, I'm fascinated with the supernatural and the paranormal. Can you tell us, outside of your writing, if there's any other aspects that you're interested in paranormal research or the supernatural in general?
We've been doing quite a bit of that with the latest book. It's called Something I Keep Upstairs. It's a haunted house story. Let me ask you a question. If you're 17 years old and your grandmother dies and she leaves you a house on a private island, what are you going to do with it?
I don't know. It depends. You had me at island to start with. So
Well,
if it's got a good view and everything, and it's got good boating access, I'm going to keep it and I'm going to live in it. And it's going to be either my vacation property, or at least, it's something that aspect.
Well, my main character in the book, his first thought is, this is going to be a party house for me and my friends. So they literally hop in the boat, and that's what they do. They've got a place that's just, it's far enough away from the police, from the parents, where they can have some fun. So they have a couple parties out there, and then that gets old after a while. And then at some point, somebody raises their hand and say, "Hey, what would it take to make this a haunted house?" It's a perfectly normal house, so what would it take to turn it into one? So they start right where you would expect. There's a couple of scary stories. At some point, somebody brings a Ouija board, but the tagline for the book is, "For a haunted house to be born, somebody has to die." So you know where they're going, but a book like this is all about the journey. But what's cool about this is the haunted house in the story is a real house. I live on a little island off the coast of Portsmouth in New England, and right off our coast is a tiny little island about a quarter mile out. It's only about an acre, and there's one house sitting on it called Wood Island. And that's where I based the book. So, the house itself is real. We just had the release party on Tuesday. We had the party in the haunted house on this private island. We brought everybody out there by ferry. And we had paranormal investigators crawling all over it, trying to find a little something. And in New England, like there are stories around everything. I found stories dating back 400 years on this property with various, sightings and paranormal experiences. It is chocked full of them.
Wow. I'm so fascinated by all that stuff. Yeah, I have family in Rhode Island and just everything. There's so much history up there just in general. So absolutely. Speaking of this house on Wood Island, and you just released something I keep upstairs. I understand you're giving people the chance to actually stay in this haunted house that inspired the book. Could you tell us a little bit more about this and how folks can enter?
Yeah, so I love marketing the books. I always try to have some fun with it. I look at what everybody else is doing to market their books and try to come up with something a little different. I have yet to find anybody who's ever put a fan up in a haunted house. So that was the goal. So one month from release date, so it's gonna be June 13th. We're gonna draw the name of one person, and they're gonna be able to take three of their friends. We're gonna take them out to this private island on a boat, drop them off on the dock, and let them spend the night in this haunted house, 24 hours by themselves, and then come back for them, and hopefully everybody will be okay.
Where do folks go to enter for this?
I can send you the link. There's a website for it.
Okay, I didn't. Is it?
Maybe
Is there a link on your website that folks can look it up?
There,
Or?
there's a link on my website. If you just go on Google and you just type in JD Barker haunted house, or about a million stories will come up. It's pretty easy to
Okay,
find.
I'll definitely post it on all my social media as well. That's really cool. That's something you just don't see very often. And man, talking about a real connection with the work. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. So
The people, the house itself in the real world, it's a museum. They just finished renovating it and they brought it back to life, and it's going to be a museum starting this year. But they're actually decorating the interior to match what I have in my book. So it really feels like you are stepping into
wow,
the novel when you walk through that place.
that's fantastic. The Fourth Monkey, The Fifth to Die, The Sixth Wicked Child, A Caller's Game. The list goes on and on of all your popular books. Is there a particular book that you've either authored or co-authored that holds a special place in your heart?
Ooh, that's sort of like asking who your favorite kid is. For me, it tends to be whatever the latest book I'm working on tends to be the favorite. But I find I've got one book in particular. It's called She Had a Broken Thing Where Her Heart Should Be, that nobody wanted. My agent pushed it back. She said, this is too long. It's, the story isn't going to work. Nobody's going to want this. The publishers didn't want it. Turned out to be a bestseller worldwide. But like every time I travel, like I was just in Budapest, and the very first time I've ever been there, and I think I've had 7 books released there over the years. We had about 1,000 people that came to my signing event, and literally half of them threw down a copy of that book and said, "This is my favorite. This is my favorite. This is my favorite." And I get that reaction pretty much everywhere I go in the world. So if I had to pick one, from a fan standpoint, it tends to be that one.
I got you. At the age of 22, you were diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, and it was determined that you were on the autism spectrum. You've said in the past that autism is your superpower. You've used your fame and experiences to speak about and help raise awareness about autism. Could you tell us a little bit more about how that diagnosis changed your life and how you attribute it to being so influential to your work?
Well, if you know anybody who's autistic in your own life, one of the things that we do is we tend to mimic other people. So if we're in a social situation and somebody cracks a joke, like I'll laugh, but I'm laughing because the other people around me are laughing, not necessarily because I found it funny. So I'm mimicking the actions that I see. I learned a long time ago I could mimic people on paper. So if somebody put a book in front of me or some text written by another author, I could pick up on their vocabulary, their writing style, their cadence, and their pacing, and I could duplicate their voice on paper. So I basically mimicked them. And that got me a lot of work in the early days, working as a book doctor. I had to take other people's text and fine tune them, so I had to keep it in their voice. I wrote a ton of memoirs for other people. So I would interview, a sports figure or a politician or an actor or an actress. And then I have to sit down and I'd write a book in their voice, in first person, as if they're the one telling it. And I was able to do that. And all of those things stem from me being autistic. It's not something I would be able to do without that.
Do you do charity and events and things like that to help raise awareness?
I do. I try to talk about it as much as I can, because it's one of those things. If you're the parent of an autistic child and that kid is, let's say, 1 year old, and they're beating their head against the wall to the point where they bleed, or just screaming if somebody touches them, like all these things are autistic traits. And if you're the parent of a child that's doing that, it almost seems like everything is hopeless. Like there's no bright light at the end of that tunnel. So I try to get in front of those parents as much as I can and just kind of show them that their kid can grow up to be successful. You just have to work with them. You have to find a lot of cases, find that one thing that they really like and then just double down on it, because that'll open them up. That'll get them talking, get a dialogue going, and ultimately it can turn into a career.
Speaking of careers, I've seen a couple of your past interviews, and I wanted to ask you this. You had a very cool job before you started writing in your younger days. Can you tell us about some of your jobs and the work you did before you started writing? I think you probably know which
Oh,
one I'm
yes.
referring to.
Yeah, this one comes up a lot. So when I went off to college, I was down in the Fort Lauderdale area. One of my first jobs, I was with RCA Records and BMG distribution. So if they had a famous recording artist come into town, I'd have to pick them up at the airport, get them to the radio station, get them to their concert, get them to their hotel. If you've ever seen that movie, Get Them to the Greek, that was essentially my life back then. And I had some very famous people in the car, and college is expensive, and I started to interview them, and I would sell those interviews to magazines like 17 and Teen People and Tiger Beat. And that's essentially how I broke into the writing world. When you work for newspapers and magazines, you quickly realize everybody's got a novel at some stage of development. It's in a desk drawer somewhere. It's 400,000 words. They've been working on it for the last 10 years. It's almost done. Like they would give those books to me, and I'd help them fine tune them. I'd help them with developmental edits and get it to the point where it could be published. And that, became a side hustle as a book doctor.
Wow, great way to jump in the industry for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. One
Um,
of the first magazines I worked at, it was called 25th Parallel. And I worked with a guy named Brian Warner, who later became Marilyn Manson.
are you kidding me? I did not know that. I have not heard that. Wow. um, this subject weighs on my mind frequently, and this is something I really wanted to ask you about. I'm going to be doing an entire show about it sometime in the next few weeks. With all the technological advancements that we're making, especially regarding AI, I'm referring, of course, to artificial intelligence. Are you concerned about writers such as yourself being pushed out and artificial intelligence basically replacing human writers completely in books, stories, even movies and television, reverting to like AI generated content? Is this something you think about or that you're at all concerned about?
I think about it all the time, and I try to stay on top of it. At this point, AI is not there. It's almost like I use Claude, I use ChatGPT. I've kind of tried them all, and it's almost like talking to an encyclopedia. Like it can regurgitate whatever it's been taught, but it's not capable of having a creative thought. And like when that happens, and it will happen, that's when I think we're going to see a lot more of an infringement, a lot more encroachment on our own world. I think at some point an AI is going to be able to write a novel. At some point, it's going to be able to write a good novel. But it's always going to be, like it's not going to be able to duplicate my voice. I'm always going to have my voice. The AI will probably have its own voice, and it may develop a fan base. Like all those things could happen. But to me, it's no different than some other competitor, some other writer that's out there on the shelf. It's just another person. I'm sad to see what's happening like on the film side, and I think you're right there. I think it's going to start replacing a lot. It's capable of writing screenplays. The AI like like they can create just about anything now with AI, without having to lift a camera. I've got friends who are audiobook narrators. I feel that whole profession is probably going to be going away because AI can narrate books now. All those types of things. I just saw a special. It's a BBC thing where they're interviewing Agatha Christie and she's giving writer tips. Completely total deep fake. It's all AI generated, but like that's happening. So how long before we start seeing, like we could see Tom Cruise as the star of every movie for the next 200 years because they're not going to have to take the time to find a new person anymore, new human. It'll be easier to do it with AI. So like those kind of things make me sad.
Yeah, that's something I don't think that's something me or you at our age that we have to worry about in our lifetimes. But I have 2 girls, and that's something I definitely worry about with them, as they grow up, that, the world they're going to be growing up in with this AI thing. So I think especially about great literary minds like you and writers, and, it makes me sad to think that's even a possibility of something that could happen, that we could, literally lose the human creative process altogether. So I was curious where you stood on that. So thanks for answering that for me. I know you probably get asked all the same questions all the time by the interviews and media. What do you like to do in your spare time? Do you have hobbies and interests outside of writing?
Well, writing was always my hobby, so that's kind of my go-to fun thing to do. The only other thing I have, I guess that would qualify is I go for like a run walk every day. I wrap up my business day at around 3 o'clock, and I do a lap around the island where I live, which is good exercise. It's relaxing, and it gives me a chance to just kind of get my head on straight and think about what I need to do the next day. So that's probably the closest other thing I have to a hobby. I spend the rest of my free time just hanging out with my wife and daughter.
Excellent. So something I keep upstairs. This is the new book that was just released. Where can people get it? I know it's hardcover. I'm sure it's also audiobook. Tell us where we can get it and everything else, all your other great works as well.
Yeah, that one came out through Simon and Schuster, so it's pretty much everywhere. Bookstores, on their ebook, audiobook, all the different things. So you can find that every place. It released on May 13th here in the U.S. in English. I think the Spanish version's coming out in a couple months, so it's gonna start trickling out around the world.
Very good. JD, it's been a pleasure. I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me. Got to go and pick up a copy of something I keep upstairs. This one sounds really, really fantastic, especially for you paranormal guys like me. So I appreciate your time, JD. Thanks for talking with me.
Thanks for having me. Take care.
Thanks, JD, again for joining me this week and sharing your experiences and work. I think I speak for everyone when I say that we can't wait to see what your next great book will be. All right, folks, that's my show for this week. I want to thank my guest, JD Barker, for joining me. Be sure to pick up a copy of his latest book, Something I Keep Upstairs, available now from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Target, or you can get the ebook on Amazon as well. Be sure to follow me and the show on all my social media accounts, Facebook, X, Instagram, Blue Sky, YouTube, or you can email me at thepppodcast@yahoo.com. Thanks as always for listening, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Politics, Prepping, and Paranormal Podcast. Your source for real news and analysis on politics, prepping, paranormal, conspiracy theories, and the volatile state of the world we live in. Tune in next week and every week for a new episode. And stay safe, stay healthy, and stay vigilant.